name's Christine Jennings, sponsored by Innova Champion Discs, and you're listening to the Chain Clankers.
You're listening to the Chain Clankers podcast with your hosts, Quentin Ferris and Horatio Gonzalez. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Chain Clankers. What is going on, everyone? Welcome into the Chain Clankers podcast. I'm your host, Quentin Ferris, here as always with Horatio Gonzalez. We got another great episode for you guys today. Hopefully you enjoyed last episode where we sat down with Innova's own Thomas Gilbert. We're going to stay with Innova this week, and we're talking to Christine Jennings. She won Rookie of the Year last year when she started on tour. She's an up-and-comer in the sport. She's a great conversation, really great gal, really loved our talk, and I think there's a lot of value in this episode, like in every single episode, and I think you're going to learn a lot. Horatio, would you like to explain a little bit more of what the listeners can expect to learn in this conversation today?
Yeah, this one was a lot of fun, especially if you're a new player or if you have a significant other that you maybe want to introduce to the sport and you're having a hard time maybe. And just some tips she talks about when she started out and some things to avoid. And then also maybe if you're in that stage of you're playing advanced tournaments or you're thinking about going pro or maybe going out to tournaments outside of your region and maybe touring a little bit but not quite full time. She's a great person to listen to because that's kind of where she's at right now. So this one's a little bit different, but a lot of fun. And I think you guys will enjoy it. Let's get to it.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into the Chain Clankers podcast. We're here sitting down with Christine Jennings, an incredible disc golfer, our first lady to come on the podcast. Super excited about that. So we're going to have a great discussion today. Christine, how are we doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Fantastic. Glad to have you on the podcast again. Super excited for this discussion. Another Innova player. Our last episode, we talked to Thomas Gilbert, who's Innova champion. Are you just Innova in general, or are you a specific, I know there's pro, champion?
I'm under, so it goes star level, champion level, crew. So I'm on the crew level. So I'm right under Thomas.
Nice. That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. Yeah. Love to hear that. We'll definitely talk a little bit more about that and that experience as we kind of get into the episode. But I kind of want to just kick things off with, how did you first get into disc golf? What was your very first disc golf moment like? Was it just, maybe you and a friend going out trying something new, or, how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, a guy that I was dating previously was playing, and I had no idea what disc golf was. It was really funny because I used to live by a park that I would go to that had disc golf baskets, and I never thought about what are those things. And this guy had like a bag with discs in it, and he told me what he did, and I'm like, okay. So one day I decided that I was going to go with him, so I went with him, and he took his whole bag out of his truck and went, and I was like, whoa, I thought you were going to take one. You get to pick one and you take it. And he's like, no, I take all of them. And I'm like, what? So then he kind of starts explaining a little bit of I'm super curious at this point. I want to know everything. And so he kind of tells me how different discs do different things. And I'm like, what in the world? So then it just got me naturally interested. And, I feel like a lot of girls have this where they want to play, but they don't want to embarrass themselves in front of all of the guys that they're with. So I was one of them, and I was pretty timid, and, I wanted to play, but I didn't want to play to embarrass myself. So it took me a little bit to actually throw a disc, but him and I went out, privately on our own, and he started teaching me a couple things, and just like every other, person that started playing, I'm throwing sky hyzers all over the place, but you get super interested and just start getting hooked.
What did that turn into once you started kind of playing for fun? What was that journey like to where you are now, I guess? Step by step kind of.
I probably threw my first disc very early of 2016. And I did it very casually, but he went out a lot, a few times a week, for an average working person, you'd say. And so I went out with him. I started going with him more and more. And then we went to our local store, Hazy Shade. And that's one of my sponsors, their disc golf store. So it took a few weeks, I think, for us to finally get to Hazy Shade. But we finally went to Hazy Shade, and I bought my first disc, and it was a Champion Valkyrie. Now thinking back at it, it was probably way too stable for me because it was like
Yeah.
170 weight, and I'm like, what are you doing? But that was one of my first discs. I loved the DX Cheetah, and that was like a hand-me-down that I got from someone, and that just kind of like started evolving into me getting a couple of my own discs. And they're expensive when you first start playing, and you're like, oh, I'll drop $60 on 3 discs and we'll see where it goes. So it was kind of one of those evolving things. But of course, the disc golf community is very giving, and so people just start giving me all these discs and things like that. And so I also caddied for him. He played a lot of AM tournaments. He was a decent advanced player, and I walked with him a lot. Went to tournaments with him. I went to BGMs with him and like walked and kind of caddied for him. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Like, you get to like play a tournament, and it's super competitive. And I played 10 seasons of volleyball, and I ran track and cross country when I was in high school. So I was already competitive in nature, kind of athletic. And so it was very interesting to me. And I kind of wanted to get into that because I wasn't doing any sports at that time. I was, I don't know, a handful of years out of high school, and I wasn't really doing anything. So I want to say very soon after that, about the fall of 2016, so same year, I got my PDGA number, and I was still I was in the 800,000. So I wasn't like in the 100,000s yet, but I got my PDGA number. I played my first tournament, I think around September of that year, and I played in rec. Wow. I played 3 tournaments that year, and it was like really, very local. It was probably C tiers or something, sanctioned events, and I got my rating, and I just remember like wanting to be 800 rated. Like at this point, I knew a good amount of like what PDGA was, what the ratings were, and things like that, because he was very involved, and I wanted to be very involved. So I had to like know everything. So I started catching on to that, and I think my very first rating was like very, very low 800s. It might have been like 811 or something, but I was just stoked that it was 800, and I'm like, woo, like milestone, and it just kind of evolved from there. And I knew that he always went to these bigger events like BGMs and stuff like that, and I kind of wanted to put our schedules together, like, oh, like now I want to go to BGMs. And so it evolved into that. And I think the next year I played more. I played maybe like 15 to 20, which is pretty good, but we didn't travel like that much. We played a whole bunch of local ones and traveled out to, maybe a couple of the big ones like BGMs. And then that next year was when I knew, I was like, okay, like I'm going to gun it, and I'm going to like go to all of these AM events, because at this point I feel like I had enough experience because I had moved out of rec after those first 3 tournaments. So in 2017, the next year, I just bumped to advanced because I won all the rec tournaments, and there isn't a lot of women in competition anyway. So I'm like, well, it doesn't really matter. I'm playing by myself in these local areas. And so then when I travel, like, let's see how I do in advanced. And so I went to BGMs, and I think I took, I don't know, like 5 out of, I took 5th out of 8. So it wasn't like great, but it was downpouring the whole time. So that I was like, okay, it's kind of hard to judge. And then we kept playing all these bigger events. And I think I'm getting my years mixed up. I think it was 2017, 2018. We went to GBO, and I won that. And then went to US Women's. I won that in advance. And I'm like, okay, like I'm doing well in advance. So then the next step after that was kind of like, well, now what? Because, it's one of those things where you think about it and you're like, I want to be 800 rated. And then you're 800 rated. And then you think like, oh, but I'm never going to be 900 rated. Like the pros are 900 rated. And like, you kind of like laugh about it, right? Because you're talking about it. And it's like one of those things you want to do, but you might not really think that is feasible. And he was like, no, like you can really do it. You can really do it. And he really like talked me into it. So I just kept playing. I kept playing. And I mean, I worked a normal job. I got off work at 4:30 every day. I went to the course until the sun went down. And literally like, that's what I did for about a year. And that's how I got pretty good. And my rating started climbing, and my confidence was boosted in these tournaments. And so when I won GBO and then I won US Women's, I was like, okay, now I have to come up with like a better goal, because I don't want to keep playing AM. Like at this point I have way too much plastic already. I've only been playing like a year. So then after that was when I decided that I wanted to go for Rookie of the Year in 2019. And that required traveling to more tournaments and like, different tiered events get you different points on how many people you beat. So I did all of that. And I ended up getting Rookie of the Year in 2019. And as soon as, because I went to Am Worlds first, and then I was gonna go for Rookie of the Year. So that's kind of how the timeline went. And so of course after I went to Am Worlds, I moved up, and then Rookie of the Year, of course, is your first year's pro. So now I'm second year as a full time, not full time, but actual pro, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that is truly an incredible story. And I
Yeah.
also think it says a couple of things that, like, this doesn't have to be something you are doing for 10 years before you go pro. I mean, literally look at like a football player, baseball, basketball,
Yeah.
any of those guys or gals. It's literally one of those things where it's like, oh man, I've literally been doing this since I was 5 years old. I mean, you came onto the
Mm-hmm.
scene, I'm pretty sure you said about 4-ish years after high school. And then look at you now, Rookie of the Year, second year on the Pro Tour, doing very well, in my opinion, on the Pro Tour in and of itself. And something that I'd love for the listeners at home to just kind of understand about Christine is that this gal has played in, correct me if I'm wrong, but according to the PDGA website, 90 career events and has 48 W's. Wins,
Yeah.
everyone. That means over half the tournament she's entered in, she has taken home that first place trophy. So that's absolutely incredible. And one thing that I really wanted to touch on that you said at the beginning was, you were kind of timid and you didn't want people to watch. And now I especially know this is how my girlfriend is. Horatio, I know your wife is the same way as well. In that, I mean, we would literally go to a course, be having a great time, and then a group of, as she would say, men are watching. I don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then I would just throw the whole, we'd move on. It is what
Yeah.
it is.
Oh.
And I will ask another question kind of similar to this here in a second, but the one that I kind of wanted to get to more was, how did you kind of get over that timidness? Was it just kind of, hey, I literally don't care where this disc goes. I don't care if you laugh at me. Like, I'm just out here having a good time. I'm trying to get better, I guess what would you, tell other girls or even guys who are scared or timid and, maybe don't want to be laughed at, what would you tell those people, if you're in a situation like that, I
Mm-hmm.
guess?
So definitely start somewhere comfortable. So I guess more with your significant other, because that's what I did. And then of course when the guys play through or whatnot, um, just the more you think about somebody else watching you, that's another thing that you have to, like, you're already thinking about the 5 million things you have to do to throw the disc right. So now
Yeah.
you're like, oh, somebody's watching me. And then like you're focusing more on that than like what you're actually doing. And your shot ends up being terrible anyways. So instead of, focusing on that, just try to focus more on what you're doing. And just in the long run, like as you're doing that and as you become better, the timidness turns into a confidence, because now you're like, I'm going to show these guys that I can throw this 250 feet. And, not a lot of women can do that, especially like starting out. So once you just got to get over it and just focus on, like, I still play with a lot of women that are really timid around specific people, or even in our ladies league, new people come and they're kind of embarrassed or whatnot. And you just got to like ease them in, of course you got to be like, oh, everyone
Yeah.
started somewhere. But the more you focus on it, I can just tell, like when these people are focused on being embarrassed, it just ends up being worse. So just don't be embarrassed. I know it's difficult and it's like hard to do, but the more you get over that, the easier your shots become and the better you'll become and the more confident you'll become.
I definitely agree with that. I would say it's easy to see as someone who starts playing, doesn't feel very comfortable, and as they start to get a more straight shot, or as they start to get the line or flight that they intended to do, they get more confident and they kind of stop
Yeah,
caring about it and start focusing on the game because they're having fun.
exactly.
So it's really cool to see that. And so I would say that's one thing for people that has someone that they want to introduce to the game and they're maybe not confident, to kind of just keep, not push them, but slowly kind of just take them out when they're comfortable. I would say pushing them if they don't feel comfortable is definitely the wrong move, because they're not going to want to go out and play again.
Mm-hmm.
So I would
Yeah,
say,
there's
yeah,
a
just let
fine
them
line as
slowly.
somebody that like is trying to take someone out also, because I've seen like the really pushy people where,
Yeah.
they're like giving way too much information. Like you have to hold the disc like this, throw it like this, do this and this and this. And then like the person's just like, I'm just trying to throw a frisbee.
Yeah.
So, like there's a fine line, of course you want to like as a disc golfer, you want to naturally teach somebody all of these things that you know.
Yeah.
But again, like you kind of have to just take a step back and just let them have fun. Like let them have fun first, and then they'll naturally want to get better. So.
Yeah, I think that's a
I would,
really good piece of advice. Horatio, would you like to
yeah.
talk about that more?
I would say for all the guys listening, probably who love to mansplain things,
Yeah.
that's probably a really, really good one to listen to, especially if you're taking out a sister or significant other who don't feel as comfortable. Definitely telling them what to do isn't always the best. Just like you said, let them have fun. And then it's better when they ask you for help and then you can give that advice to them,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
then
They're
to
more
push it
receptive
onto
to
them.
it because they
Yeah.
want to know rather
Yeah.
than you just attacking them with information. They're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe also something is, I know at least in my situation with my girlfriend, I tried to take her out when I first started playing like 3 years ago, and then I kind of just haven't picked it up again until COVID season. But, those couple years ago when we would try to go out or I'd try to take her out, I felt as though, especially after hearing this, I was trying to force it too much and I just didn't let it happen. And then kind of once COVID and all that hit, and, that was really the only thing to go outside and be able to do. It definitely, she wanted to get involved in it. She wanted to go out. She wanted to learn how discs flew. So I think like also not trying to push, even if it's a friend, spouse, sister, like you said, Horatio, don't try to push them like, hey, you have to do this. You have to learn all these things, throw all these
Yeah.
discs.
Yeah.
Like, kind of give them that opportunity to kind of fall in love with the sport themselves. And I think you'll see a lot more people really love the sport and a lot more people playing the sport. And, kind of as I want to, I guess, kind of continue this because I know myself and Horatio, we've both tried to get our significant others to play in tournaments. So I guess let's talk a little bit about your first tournament. And, I guess what kind of was that deciding factor to, make you actually like, okay, yep, I'm doing this tournament. This is going to happen. Were you on a card with other ladies? Were you able to play with your significant other? What kind of was going through your mind? What were your emotions that morning? Oh my gosh, am I actually going to do this? I guess kind of take the listeners through that experience.
Yeah. So I have already been to tournaments, but I wasn't playing in them, right? Because I was walking with my significant other at the time. And so I kind of knew, like I had a feel for how tournaments ran, especially going to BGMs. That's one of the biggest tournaments ever held. So, I had the big taste of that. And then I've also been to like the smaller local ones. And everyone's super friendly. Like at this point, I've kind of like become very friendly with a lot of the locals. So like I kind of saw familiar faces because my first couple tournaments was local. So when I got my PBGA number, I knew that I was eventually going to start playing tournaments. And I think it was a couple months after that where, we were just waiting for a tournament to pop up. And so then, we signed up for one, and he was also playing the same tournament. And so I was like, he wasn't there with me when I was playing, I was on my own, like, here I go.
Yeah.
But at the point, watching him and kind of like, I wanted to know everything. So I had already read the rule book. I think I was already certified. Like I'd done all of that already. So I was just kind of like ready, but very nervous. And so I knew that I had like worked on my putting a lot. That was one of my favorite things to do. And I was really good at putting. And so my very first tournament, I ran everything. It was terrible. So, playing disc golf, you have to be smart and every stroke counts. And so I went to this tournament. I was very nervous, just like anybody else would. I did play with women. I played with a couple other local women in this area. I don't think I had met them, so very friendly, like super cool card to play with. And I got to see, how I compared to other people because that's kind of like what the tournament is about. Granted, like you could see and play with other people in your area anyways, but that's kind of like, when the tournament time comes, like how do you compare? So I had never played with a lot of women until then. So I go to this tournament and we start playing and I'm like, I'm probably only throwing like 240 feet at this point. And I wasn't being outdriven, but I wasn't also outdriving them. So we were all very similar in driving. And I'm like, okay. But then when it came to your short game, I was beating them in the short game because, again, like I was practicing putting all the time. So where you see like the score separation in rec women is upshots and putting because you see a lot of women miss from like 10 feet. And I had those dialed because I was practicing putting all the time. And so I like felt really confident knowing like, oh, like that's where the scoring separation is. Like I don't have to throw 350 feet to be able to like beat these people. It's all the short game. Like that's how the women's competitive side is. And so then I was getting a little overconfident and I started like running the 40 footers and the 50 footers because I'm like, oh, it's like right there. Well, then, you miss it because it's like a tournament. And once you miss it, I have a spin putter, so I'm flying past it and I have like a 30-foot comebacker and I'm like, oh no, like what did I do? But I kept doing it because I'm like,
Yeah.
a 40 footer again. I'm gonna get this one. Like I didn't get the last one. Well, then like I just kept kind of like going back and forth, and that's when I like started realizing, like that's you have to make mistakes to learn. So that was kind of my mistake that I made of, you don't run everything. You kind of have to be smart or, give half bids or whatever it is. And it was very interesting. I learned a lot from my first tournament and it was really fun.
I would say that that's definitely like a newbie person doing tournaments thing to do is like be maybe a little overconfident in yourself, like feeling good, and you do shots that you don't need to do that you're not
Yeah.
really you shouldn't be doing, and then you mess up, and that's the way you learn. I know
Hmm.
we're kind of to a point right now where we're doing tournaments, and sometimes we go out and we play terrible, and it feels like we're just wasting money. Like we're paying money to just play bad,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it sucks. But then afterwards, the next day or a few days later after the tournament, I I feel like I am a better player for some reason.
Hmm.
Like my shots are a little bit better, or I have a different idea of what to do when I'm throwing. So I guess what's one thing with tournaments? Like, do you think you have to be competitive in order to sign up for these tournaments? Um, have that side to want to win, I guess, or do you think they're good even though you're not going to win or even though you're not going to do great? To do tournaments, sign up for them to help you learn quicker.
There's, I've learned two types of people. There's the people that want to continue to succeed and continue to be better, and those are usually the ones that end up going pro. So myself, I wasn't ever going to be okay with, I'm a naturally competitive person, so I wasn't okay with just throwing 240 feet for the rest of my life and
Yeah.
throwing spike heisers all over the place. I wanted to get better and I wanted to know what I was doing. And so, there's people that are like me and they just want to keep getting better and they'll keep pushing. And so that's all these new people that are coming into the MPO and FPO field. But then there are the local people that are totally content with where they're at. They like to play leagues, they like to drink while they're playing, and that's totally fine. They're totally casual about it.
Yeah.
And they're not ones that are ever going to go to the pro tour, or they're not going to, want to go to these bigger events. And so I think it's just kind of like you have to know what you want and know where, like how you're gonna do with where you're at, if that makes sense. So like you're gonna spend a boatload
Yeah.
of money at BGMs, but you might have to be okay with not coming home with anything except for the sweet players pack that you're gonna get. And that's what
Yeah.
happened to me. Like I took fifth out of eight. I didn't cash, but like I got a lot of experience out of it. And so that's just kind of like where you have to draw that fine line. And a lot of people fall into the casual local tournaments and they're totally fine with just playing C tiers and B tiers. And even that gives you, I think, a lot of like mental and just like overall knowledge of how to play better. Because when you're playing casually, not in a tournament, you're taking your shots for granted, or you like you'll miss the first putt and you'll be like, oh, like I got the next one, and you just like double putt. And like
Yeah.
you don't do that in a tournament. Like every shot literally counts, and so then you start kind of analyzing things more. And I think it does make you a better player, but you just have to like know, where your expectations are, especially financially, if you know that you're not gonna, do very well, maybe.
Yeah, I really like that kind of last comment that you made also about the analyzing the different shots and stuff like that, because a lot of the AMs that we've kind of talked to and just out on the course or in tournaments, there's a good number of them who are like, I just kind of just randomly throw it and hope for the best. And I definitely know this last tournament that Horatio and I played, our round one and round two, that was pretty tough. Okay, we did not do well. Um, we had a bad person to play with on our card, and it really honestly just drained the absolute life out of me. It turned into a political discussion, and instead of focusing on the golf, I was focusing on
Yeah.
trolling this guy. And so
Oh
like it
no.
turned into a complete nightmare. It was 100 degrees. I was hot, and I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna focus on trolling this guy, and it didn't go well. But then the next day, came back, and I feel as though being able to play the course a second time and come back the next day, it really did allow for more
Mhm.
of that analyzing of the shots. And I mean, I think it was like a 10-stroke difference or something like that. So that was really good. But kind of where I guess I'm going with this tangent is, have you ever been playing and had any terrible card mates, and how has that affected your own game, and maybe some ways to, just get those folk out of your head? And B, what I guess kind of things are you looking at when you're analyzing a throw? Are you going through all the different possible discs you could throw there? Are you going through maybe the different kind of shot selections? Kind of what's going through your head when you're kind of thinking about what throw to make?
Um, so going back to your first question of have I ever played with anybody so terrible? Um, luckily, no. I've heard a lot of horror stories of people that have like played with, I don't know, like rule Nazis or people that just like want to complain about everything.
Yeah.
Luckily, I've not been. I have played with some people that I've heard that are like that, but I try to be very easygoing. Like I, I think I've called a foot fault once, but like I'm not gonna sit there and call you on every little tedious thing. I'm gonna let you do you, and I also try to be like very chill on the card. Like I'll talk to you, you can talk to me. I'm not going to be rude to you. I might be throwing bad and be quiet, but like nothing towards you. And like I make that known to the people that I'm playing with. And so I feel like that helps the mood of everyone else and like how they feel about me. No, that's what I like to think anyways, because I don't like dislike anybody and I would hope the same for me. But I just try to keep like good spirits on the card and none of that negative stuff. I've never trolled anybody on a
Well, that's
card.
good.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
good. I mean, this man was one of those guys who he was like, "Oh, look at those idiots with their masks on playing disc golf." I was like, "Guy, come on, this is not the place." And then he
oh.
took that and decided he was gonna get all super political about it. And so then anything he would say
Oh
was
my
like, "I'm
gosh.
just gonna say the complete opposite and just mess with this guy." I mean, he did throw worse, so I guess that was a W. But
So
I
you
just
did
should have
you did
focused on myself.
you did affect him. That's funny. I feel like more of that happens in AMs, and I'm not
Yeah.
trying to say that like in any other way, but a factual way, because a lot of AMs are always trying to call rules for some reason, and like it's like me progressing and like playing in the professional field. Yes, like you have to be calling the rules. You have to, for the integrity of the sport. However, like you don't have to call stupid stuff, and I feel like that's what AMs
Yeah.
try to do is they call stupid stuff, or like you might have like your toe must have like just nicked the mini or something like that, but you want to call it football. Like, did he really get an advantage from that? Like you just have to kind of analyze those things, and I don't know. I hear a lot of funny stories from AMs
Well, I
with
think
those kind
because
of
like
things.
advanced players are more once you move into the pro level, they realize that they're not really playing. It doesn't matter who's on their card. They're not focused on the other players. They're focused on themselves. And if that person's doing a football or whatever, like their game or is probably messed up in other areas, they're going to focus
Mm-hmm.
on what they're doing, how their game is, and they're not
That's
going to
a good
waste their
point.
mental space on
Yeah,
someone else.
exactly. Yeah, AMs are like too focused on like what everyone else is doing, and then like once you
And
kind of
yeah,
get out of that and focus on you, that's when for sure your game gets better.
Yeah, and I also
But
think like
okay.
real quick before we get to the other part of the question, like even like
Mhm.
watching the pro tour and like, I feel as though maybe sometimes on that AM level, if there's a disc that's kind of close to OB, not maybe it is, maybe it isn't. You'll see a lot of the AMs be like, nope, that's OB. I'm getting the stroke on this guy. I'm, you know what I mean? Where like
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think Kevin Jones is an incredible example of somebody who's like, if he can call it in, he's going to call it in for you no
yeah,
matter what. Like he'll see like this
Yeah.
much of the disc in bounds and he's like, nope, that's definitely in. Or I feel
yeah.
like a lot
Yeah.
more the higher you get, it's like it literally doesn't matter. Like if it's in, it's in. Let's just keep
Mhm.
playing. I don't need you to throw OB for me to win this
Right,
tournament or
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, you're
cash or
not
something like
like
that.
we're there together, but we're just playing together and like officiating each other, right? We're not there to like fight at each other. We're
Yeah.
just playing together. So yeah, exactly. That's a good point.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then the second part of that question before we move on, sorry, that was a long discussion. I know, I definitely know that people at home will want to kind of hear this. What is it about the analyzation of the shots, before you actually release the disc? What are you thinking when it comes to disc selection? What are you thinking when it comes to, okay, am I going to throw a hyzer here? Should I throw a forearm shot here? What are you looking for also? Are you looking at a point in the sky? Is it, maybe like a tree or something like that? I guess kind of just a little bit of a discussion about how you analyze your shot before you let it go, I guess.
Yeah. So starting like at the tee pad, let's use like a 350-foot backhand hyzer, for example. I'm a right-handed person. I only throw like 320 feet max distance, like full flex. So if I'm throwing like a straight shot in the woods, it's probably only going like 300 feet because I can't get that full flex. So if we were like in a narrow, like 350-foot backhand hyzer, a lot of people like will want to throw, I don't know, let's say destroyer. Like the destroyer is going to go straight to fade. So I'm going to throw my destroyer because it's going to go straight and fade, just like the hole straight and fades. But really, you're not going to throw the disc 350 feet. So now you're going to like dump your hyzer probably like 270 feet into the left side of the fairway. And now you're going to have like this weird like angle that you have to hit. So instead of throwing the shot for how you think the hole plays, you have to like break down how you play. So me knowing that I don't throw 350 feet, I'm going to throw something as straight as possible. So I might throw like a mid-range or, a flippy or disc or something to throw it as far as I can safely. And then I probably will throw it 270 feet safely. Then I have, another 120 or so feet to get it to the basket. And so then I'll just break it down from there. Now I have like a putter hyzer or, a mid-range hyzer or whatever it is. And so a lot of people always mistake that. And same thing with, I say a lot more people do it forehands. Like, oh, it's a 420-foot forehand shot. I'm going to throw a forehand off the tee. Yeah. And I'm like, why? Like you can throw a backhand and then like throw a forehand. And so just like analyzing and knowing like what your game is. And I always tell people, take your highest percentage shot. So you were asking, like, how do I make a backhand or forehand decision? I just started throwing forehands pretty consistently, like over the past 6 months. And I can probably only throw it like 250 foot at best. And if I ever like come to a hole where I could throw a backhand, I'm probably going to throw the backhand just because the backhand is what I'm more comfortable with. And that's going to be my highest percentage because I could miss the forehand. I could miss the line. And so it's just, you have to know your game. And I think that's kind of like how you become elevated and how you play is because you have to do the field work to know like what your discs are going to do in different situations. So when I get to a lie, there's like a good example. I was just in Pittsburgh playing Moraine State Park. I don't like to throw forehands in the woods because I just learned how to throw them. But there was a shot where it's like, it's literally a 90-degree bend and it was like 220 feet. And I'm like, you can't really throw a putter because you have to throw the putter really high, like on an anhyzer. And I'm like, okay, like I have to throw a forehand. Like I just have to do it. But it's like, at that point, what's the disc that's going to go right when I throw it? Because it has to bend. So at this point, I'm like, okay, it's going to be my gator or my destroyer, like my two most stable discs that I have. And probably going to be a destroyer because my gator is not going to go that far. So, just knowing your discs and then like knowing when to throw those. Like I'm not sitting here like I could throw the sidewinder on like a really flippy forehand, like I'm not sitting here analyzing 5 different discs. I kind of know like what disc I need to do. I'm bouncing between a couple rather than like my whole bag. And then you just gotta, I usually aim at something in the distance more than closer to you. So if it's like a straighter shot in the fairway, pick a tree, which is funny because you'll hear people say like, oh, I aimed at that tree. And then like you actually hit it. But like aim at a tree like farther in the distance where you're like, I'm going to throw my destroyer flat at that tree. And before it gets there, it should hyzer out and like go down the fairway, like aim at something in the distance.
I think that's a good point you made about the discs and doing the field work. Because I think a lot of times people like to go out and practice and they don't get the best idea of what their discs are going to do on a course because you're trying to throw it a certain way every time if you get to a hole. You're like, well, it worked this time at this hole, throwing it this way and whatever the conditions were that day, as opposed to if you go out in the field that's completely open and you throw that disc 5-10 times and see what it does 7 out of those 10 times, depending if you throw it the same. So how much field work do you do, or how much field work do you still do field work to where you're comfortable learning a disc, or what does that look like for you?
I don't get to practice as much as I would like to nowadays because I started school again. But I do still go out and like putt, and Bart and I will go out into the field just to test new discs. Sometimes we lose discs. Like if I lost a Sidewinder, I have to find a replacement Sidewinder. So then, I have many backups. So you take the backups and kind of like start learning the new ones again and figure out which one you're going to put in your bag. Other days I'll just take my bags and throw them across the field. I'll dump my bag out this way. I'll bring it back this way. Just kind of keep going back and forth into the field. Some discs, like I only throw on forehand. So like I have a really beefy destroyer I'm only going to use it for forehand because I kind of want it to just dump like for an emergency hyzer. Same thing with the gator. I probably won't throw a gator backhand. I could probably manipulate something else to do that. But otherwise, I'm practicing those shorter forehands, and practicing those little chip shots here and there like gives you the confidence to do it in a tournament. And then I'm still working on the distance shots with forehand, so I probably wouldn't throw those in a tournament because I could probably throw a backhand instead. But that like kind of builds your confidence, and that's why I'm able to start throwing forehands now, because when I'm throwing these discs back and forth up and down the field, I'll take the gator and the destroyer and like throw those on forehand, and then I'll like mess with a couple other flippy discs and like throw them on forehand. So just kind of like those stupid little shots that you throw for fun, kind of turn into like muscle memory or more confidence that you get boosted. And like something else that I wanted to piggyback on the highest percentage shot thing, where you were saying people will throw that disc because it worked on that hole. So if you're like at a 300-foot hole and you threw a Sidewinder and it like flipped up and like did this whole thing and it parked it, so then they keep going and like they keep throwing this disc because that disc worked. Well, like a Sidewinder is this really flippy disc, and so now you're going into this field at this 300-foot hole with headwind and the Sidewinder flips. And then you're like, well, what happened? Because, you're always throwing this disc, but like now because you don't know how that disc reacts into the wind. So now maybe, for highest percentage, like in a tournament, that's a situation where if it's wide open, I would almost always throw something stable on a hyzer over throwing like something that flips up and like has to do this whole like thing to get to the basket. So that's something that I feel like a lot of people get tripped up on.
Nice. Okay, so we got 2 more questions before we get into our ace round, and we'll kind of try to make them a little bit quicker. The first one is talk a little bit about your sponsorships, being with Innova. I know the listeners love to hear how it happens, how fast did it happen for you. So kind of talk about that experience and what it's been like so far being on Team Innova.
So Innova happened. Oh, I told you I'm really bad with years. I think it happened in 2017. This is my 3rd year. Yeah. So I got sponsored by Team Hazy Shade first. So Hazy Shade was that local disc golf shop. And I went in there and I got sponsored by them the first like full year that I started playing. Very thankful for them. And so then being on that team kind of like helped me get more involved because I felt more comfortable with the team. And so we would do team outings or, go play team fundraisers or stuff like that. So we were just kind of like getting acclimated. And so then I would become more involved in the ladies league and then play like other leagues. And so I was just getting more comfortable, and that was like a really good foot in the door for me to like be more friendly with the community. And so that gave me the confidence and kind of a good background to go to Innova and say, hey, like I'm doing all of these things for the community. I'm really involved. Also, I'm really wanting to start playing all of these tournaments. What's up? So they came back earlier that year. I think it was like February of 2017. And I got sponsored, and that was really, I guess, like nerve-wracking and exciting at the same time because Jonathan Poole called me, and Jonathan Poole's the team manager, and I knew that, and I was like, oh my God, Jonathan Poole's calling me. Like, what do I say? I have to be it's like a job interview.
Yeah.
But he's like this really chill guy and like super lax, and just kind of asking like what my aspirations and my goals are. So I talked to him about that, and I want to say like a couple weeks after that, it was when I got an email and got the contract, and I'm like, I'm on Team Innova, and it was so cool. They give you this order sheet where I can like order my allotment discs, and so I got my first allotment, and like they had the little team wings on them, and like that was the most exciting thing ever.
That's
and
awesome.
So that was like the start of how I got sponsored.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's really awesome. Love hearing that. And I think it's coming from the right place first. It's coming from a place of, I want to help the community. I want to grow the disc golf community. Look at what I've done to help build the community, not just give me
Mhm.
free discs, give me free money, those kinds
Yeah,
of things. So
yeah.
I think that's really good. And then the final question that we've got before we get into the ace round is, let's talk about your YouTube channel a little bit.
Oh.
We've seen you put out a little bit of content, and not so much recently, but that's perfectly fine. So let's talk a little bit about it. What, I guess, kind of ideas do you have for that channel going forward? Where can people subscribe to you over at it? What, and also like just coming up with disc golf content in the first place. Like, what, I guess,
Mhm.
does it take to come up with the content for your videos? Do you sit down with your significant other now and just have those, I guess, kind of discussions of like, hey, maybe these are some videos that we should try to do, or
Mhm.
I guess kind of take us through that process.
Yeah, for myself, I started with content with Instagram. And so that was just kind of generally, I'm gonna throw this shot. Hey friend, like, can you record me real quick? It started kind of with like a form check. I just wanted to check my form. But then I
Yeah.
started posting like my not my results, kind of like my progress, and people started following me. And so I'm like, oh, okay, like I'm gonna keep posting. And so that's kind of how like that started. And then people start asking questions, and that's where the content idea came from for YouTube, because a lot of people ask the same questions, especially me being a female. People are like, how do I get my girlfriend involved, or what discs should I get my girlfriend to throw? And that's, I think, one of my very first videos is how to get like a beginner's guide, or how to get your girlfriend to start playing disc golf. And I talked about that kind of stuff and touched on like the first things that we said, where we're like, don't push your girlfriend too hard.
Yeah.
And then that kind of just came with more, like, it just keeps rolling into each other. So that video came with questions on, now what discs should my girlfriend throw? So then I made a video of disc selection for beginners and women. And then people are like, oh, how do you get rid of tournament jitters? So then like I made a tournament video. So it's a lot of like just feedback rather than me
Yeah.
coming up with ideas. But then when we get bored, Bart and I will make couples videos. There's a couple of those out there. So just for fun, we'll go out and just make, oh, like, let's do some ideas are taken from other couples or other disc golf channels, like challenges and whatnot. But then we were quarantined, so we went to Hazy Shade and got one of those Innova mini baskets and like did the mini tournament or the mini round in our apartment. So that was really funny.
Yeah, that's
But
awesome.
yeah, just
They're good videos. I enjoyed them. We
very
watched a couple
spontaneous.
of them. I really liked
Oh, thank
them.
you.
Definitely on the road to 2K subs over there. So if you're listening and you like some of that content, you've liked this discussion, definitely go over there, check it out. We also noticed that your Instagram's nearing 18K, so that's awesome. Congratulations on that one. That's really
Thank you.
exciting. But let's go ahead. Let's get into the ace round now. So these are the same 5 questions that we want to ask every single person we interviewed. So that way our listeners can kind of compare and contrast, what every single person thinks about, these certain questions. So the first question that we have is, you're bringing someone who's brand new to disc golf. What are the 3 discs that you would tell them to get or start playing with? What's the one putter, what's the one mid-range, and what's the one driver that a brand new player should start out with?
I would say a max weight DX AVR. I say max weight because I don't believe in anything else for a putter. Wombat 3 for mid range. This is the most glidey, understable mid range that you could throw, and it's really good for shot shaping. And then a sidewinder, just for like that extra distance, but it's not crazy stupid like a destroyer, because nobody wants to start with a destroyer.
Okay, cool. Question number 2. Favorite course you have played, or the course that's on your number 1 that you would love to play? Or both.
My favorite course that I've played would be WR Jackson. So that's where the Hall of Fame National Tour finale was in the past couple years. It's not going to be there this year, but it's like really mature woods golf. It's not like little tiny twiggy trees that you have to maneuver around. It's like really manicured fairways and these like large trees around you. So, like you have fairway to work with, but you definitely don't want to kick into the rough kind of.
Yeah.
It's really, really clean woods golf. I really liked it. I really want to go to MVP just because the course always looks super cool when I watch it on coverage. I haven't been out there yet.
Nice. Can't wait to see you out there. That's going to be super exciting. Our third question is, if you could go back to, when you very first started playing disc golf, what is the number one tip you would have told yourself?
To throw neutral and understable plastic. Don't throw a destroyer.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, I love that answer. I think when I started playing, I just accidentally picked up like some really overstable stuff, and it was kind of frustrating. And then once I kind of started learning, and then I picked up some more understable, it was definitely a confidence booster because
Yes.
they go farther, they go more straight. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like
All right,
everyone goes through that.
Question number 4, your favorite memory playing disc golf?
My favorite memory was winning U.S. Women's in 2017 in advanced. There was like 4 courses that we played. The first one was very, I don't know, easier, I guess. The next 2 were very wooded. And I specifically remember that on like hole 16 of the 3rd round, this girl that was competing with me had taken an 8, and I took like a 3 or 4. And so I gained like that many strokes on her on that hole. And that gave me like an 8-stroke advantage going into the final round. And the final round was on a ball golf course. So I was like hyped up, and I'm like, you can't screw it up on a ball golf course. And I won the U.S. Women's Championships, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely love going into that final round with a lead, knowing like it's in the bag.
Yeah.
This is a locked and loaded thing. I imagine Ricky Wysocki, you definitely was feeling that at the Ledgestone with being up. I want to say it was 8 or something like that whenever he won, but nonetheless, that feeling of it's in the bag, it feels incredible. So our final question we have for the interview is, what is your goal moving forward in disc golf?
I think to continue to compete, but not full-time until it pays more, or maybe it might not pay more within my decade or my timeline. And I'm okay with that. I work full-time, and I have benefits, and I have, a retirement account and things like that. And I have other goals. I like to work out. I'm into fitness. I'm going to college again and things like that. So, if all else fails, like I have backup options, and I'm okay with that. I know there's some people that are out there that are on the road full time, and they're doing that, and that's totally cool with them. But I kind of like having different things that I have going on, and I'm just kind of hitting different goals throughout my life. So
what about just for your personal game? What are some goals you have there, just in disc golf in general?
Personal game, I need to fix my form eventually. It's like one of those things that I haven't fixed because it's working, but it could get better for me to throw better or to throw farther. So definitely like working on my form, and then kind of perfecting my putt a little bit more. I've been having issues with that recently.
Okay.
Nice. I think those are some great goals. I loved our discussion today. Hopefully everyone at home listening loved the discussion as well. Christine, we'd love to have you on again sometime. I definitely learned a lot. Hopefully you had a good time as well. We appreciate you coming on the podcast. Do you have any final words or anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
Yeah, this is your time.
I just want to thank you guys for having me here. I love the video podcast. I've never done it before. And then always thank you to my sponsors, and Hazy Shade for hooking me up with all the sweetest plastic, Rickaroons, their coconut energy bar. They're great. Savage Apparel for keeping me looking good on the course. This is one of their shirts, by the way. And Perfect Putt 360, which I need to use more to get better at putting.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you for listening to the Chain Clankers podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Chain Clankers, and hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to us from so you never miss another episode.